Thanks for joining me today. It's Debbie Miller on Move or Improve with Debbie. I'm going to talk today about a topic that I think is becoming a trend, blending communities and families in either a home within a home or a community is a trend that has been developing for several years now, and I think it's only going to continue to grow as the baby boomers age and millennials search for affordable housing. I mean, after all, it does make sense. Now, what do I mean by multi-generational housing? Well, Pew Research defines it as a household that includes at least two adult generations or grandparents and grandchildren under the age of 25. Multi-generational living is becoming a fusion of sorts of the best trends in senior living innovation, and everyone can benefit from it. So let's talk a little bit about how the trend got started. Now, there's several reasons for the beginning of this phenomenon. So the first is, before World War II, well, about 25% of Americans were in multi-generational households. After the war, there was a general feeling that parents should stay in the family home and the children should spread their wings, so to speak, and create your own nuclear family. Don't remain too close to your parents. Leave your hometown, move to the city. A home of their own was considered a measure of success. But more recently, as marriages became fragile or delayed and housing costs rose, there became a trend towards pooling resources under one roof to care for aging parents, provide child care with grandparents taking care of the grandchildren, and increasing the closeness among the family members. Second was the 2006 to 2011 real estate market crash. And all across the country, foreclosures and short sales affected many owners' credit, and it resulted in families turning to a parent or other family member for housing. In addition, college graduates carried high levels of tuition debt, and for many, it's been difficult to find a job in their field, and even if they do, rents and mortgages are high. And another reason to pool housing resources is to care for an aging parent. I remember many years ago, my grandmother and great-grandmother lived with us when they were unable to care for themselves. Let me start again. That doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Sorry.
Not a problem.
Okay. All right, count me down.
All right, here we go. Going in 3, 2, 1.
And another reason to pool housing resources is to care for an aging parent. I remember many years ago as I was growing up, my grandmother and great-grandmother lived with us when they were unable to care for themselves. We cared for them in our home until they passed away. And I remember fondly getting up and braiding my grandmother's hair in the morning and helping her get ready. And I didn't think there was anything unusual about that. The fifth reason is millennials are staying home as well. That demographic was born between 1980 and 2000. They make up almost 1/3 of stay-at-home children. So that's an important factor in this whole process as well. Number 6 is another demographic that welcomes extended family are those of Hispanic and Asian cultures. Living together as blended family comes naturally in their countries, and it continues when they move to the U.S. And last, another demographic are adult children who are, quote, suddenly single. They live with a partner or spouse and the relationship doesn't last. The breakup can be especially difficult if they have children. And it's sometimes easier to start again if they have the support of family members at home. Grandparents can care for the children while the parent works. So what does a multi-generational housing situation look like? Well, they can take on several venues. They can be multi-component units, like you can have a duplex, which are basically two houses side by side sharing the wall, or an up and down configuration. And in some areas, there can be triplexes or fourplexes. Second choice would be a build to suit multi-generational home. Now, nationally, home builders have recognized the need for multi-generational housing, and as a result, they're designing specific floor plans to reflect and meet this growing need. Lennar is a leader in this type of housing. It has trademarked the term next gen, all one word, floor plan, and it designs The designs were developed by Perlman Architects, but many other builders are following suit with variations on that concept. This type of next-gen home consists of two homes under one roof. You cannot tell they're two separate homes from the outside. Each area has its own entrance, its own kitchen, its own laundry, and its own garage. Privacy is a must and is provided with these innovative floor plans. One of the living spaces is generally smaller and on the main level. The larger adjoining space accommodates parents and children. The grandparents are just a doorknob away from joining the rest of the family. The grandparents have their own separate outside entrance as well as an adjoining door inside that allows them to access the main part of the living space. There's just a doorway that separates the spaces. Now, these homes allow families with parents to age in place, allow the children to grow up in them and not have to move. And the benefits of having children grow up with their grandparents is beneficial in many ways. In 1960, only 9% of households were headed by an unmarried parent. Today, that number is 34%. And as the grandparent ages, they are still very much a part of the family unit, and they can receive care without moving into an assisted living facility. Third type of housing could be an existing home that's been retrofitted to accommodate an extended family. These will often appear as dual master suites so that everyone has their own space. The floor plan can be minimal as a master suite on the main level with its own bath, or it could include a lower level with a bedroom, living dining area, full bath, laundry, easy access to the outside, all with no steps involved. I have remodeled homes to accommodate 3 generations of families so that everyone benefits from the space and the relationships that are nurtured in this environment. Fourth is common in Hawaii. It's called the casita. They're an apartment that's attached to the main home, and they can also be found in states like Rhode Island, California, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, and mainly in the warmer climates. A fifth choice would be a master plan community with age-based neighborhoods, which allows for active adults in one area and families with children live close by but in the same community. There can be apartment complexes, daycare, medical, much more, all within the same community. And this type of community allows active and older adults to have a daily connection with the neighborhood as well as the rest of the world. Isolation is not a part of this way of living. Now you may ask, Debbie, is this style of housing here to stay, or is this just a fad? Well, the Pew Research Center, which compiles statistics on the number of Americans living in a household with at least 2 adult generations, found that 20% of the U.S. population lives this way. In 1970, only 26 million Americans lived in this type of household, but today it's 64 million. So consumer demand and baby boomers living longer and healthier all attribute to a growing demand for this type of housing. Baby boomers are not going to drift off into the sunset and live in a confined community where everyone else is old. People want to live in vibrant communities, not isolated places where care is expensive and sometimes questionable. And savvy builders are realizing that it makes more sense to sell to the net worth rather than the income. It makes better sense to include seniors, millennials, middle-aged folks in the mix and spread the wealth out. The goal is to capture smaller portions of larger markets and merge them into one community. After all, they aren't making any more land, so this makes good sense. Aging in place is becoming the new norm, not only for baby boomers, but for everyone. There's no need for interior housing design to hamper a person's ability to move from room to room and live safely and comfortably in their own home. Unfortunately, much of the housing stock doesn't allow for that, and so retrofitting and refurbishing is a growing market. The multi-generational way of living isn't a new form, but its growth has been hampered somewhat by zoning laws that restrict the number of people who can live in a home and how that home has to be structured. So this is a big problem because jurisdictions are going to need to modify their zoning laws to accommodate multi-generational living. Communities need to be forward-thinking and be willing and able to accommodate an 8-year-old as well as an 80-year-old and everyone in between. Many communities today are centered around the car. Visionary communities would include places where people don't necessarily have to rely on their car. They can walk to places, and local amenities are grouped accordingly. A goal should be to erase the need for residents to live where they are and not have to move into a retirement community necessarily. Multi-generational inclusion allows for mixed use and communities that flourish. The increase in social integration will benefit all residents, as well as adding value to the community and the areas surrounding it. A preschool can be connected to a playground or an art room that hosts multi-generational classes on arts and crafts, or a yoga or a movie theater or an open space for parties or gardening can be included as well. There's an increase in shared relationships and childcare and more. An area that is already rich in amenities can give seniors more freedom to access these places, even if they don't drive anymore. Now you ask, Debbie, how do I know if multi-generational family is that kind of living? Is that for us? Well, there are many cases where family members should not try to live together. They need to like each other and have shared interests and compatible habits and be willing to create harmony in the household. If your family is overprotective of their possessions or too protective of boundaries, then it's not a good fit. But the benefits could include facilitating childcare, which saves money for the parents when the grandparents can help with getting the children out of the house in the morning. I have relatives who moved to be closer to the grandchildren, and they enjoy, as grandparents, taking the children to school and dropping them off. They can listen to the conversation and talk to them about their day-to-day life experiences. Parents should not expect grandparents to be on call 24/7, though. Another benefit is when an older family member begins to have health issues. The adult children can help and supervise the older person's care. But be aware that unlike child care, which gets easier as the children grow, elder care can become more difficult over time, especially if the older parent has dementia or mobility issues. But the cost savings of keeping the grandparents close by is a big plus. So you talk about, well, what do we have to worry about if we do this? Well, we have to keep the peace, and let's talk about that. First, does your home work for everyone that's involved in living there? Are there too many stairs? Does the bathroom need renovating to accommodate an elderly parent? Is the home safe for the children who live there? Second, I think regular family meetings to discuss issues is helpful in avoiding problems. You need to determine child care boundaries, tasks that will be undertaken by the children to help an older family member. What happens at meal times with cooking? Are there separate spaces for that, or is it a communal effort? Third, you need to ensure that everyone has their own space. You need a place to watch TV. A large bedroom with an ensuite bath is a plus for the grandparent. Special areas for the children to play or do homework has to be decided on as well. Fourth, you want to dispose of extra furniture that prevents safety, and you want to declutter to avoid falls. And realize that as children grow up, they, as teenagers, won't want to spend as much time with a grandparent. And the older family members may not appreciate the volume level on the TV or the stereo. So fifth, you want to see if your housekeeping standards match each other. How often do you vacuum? What days do you do the laundry, mow the lawn, other household chores? When everyone is responsible for pitching in and helping as they can, it makes coexisting much easier. Sixth, be sure that your house can accommodate multi-generational living. And as I said before, a lot of the housing in America does not accommodate, because there's too many levels, bathrooms are too small, there's narrow hallways.